1 year ago, we embarked upon our most ambitious project to date. This January, we hope to finish it. Ed, and Eddy, coming this January to Cartoon Network.
Hello.
And we're live.
Hey, we're live. We're back.
Hi.
We're back. Hi.
Back
You're
at it.
here. We have a guest. We're here. He's Kevin. He's here.
I'm here, and I'm Kevin.
What do you do, Kevin?
I do some animation on my own. It's very inspired by Ed and Eddy.
Alright.
And, I heard you guys wanted to talk about it.
Yeah?
We did.
So, last time we talked about Satoshi Kon, we went to Japan.
Ooh.
No, we didn't, but
Love him.
it was really fun talking about him. So now we're not going back to America yet. We're gonna take a little detour upwards. We're gonna go to Canada.
Wow, north to Alaska.
Getting some Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
America's hat.
But not the television show Northern Exposure. That's not what we're going to be talking about today.
No. We're gonna be talking about what Kevin mentioned, Ed and Eddy.
Yeah.
And so a lot of us kind of grew up with Ed and Eddy. It was 1999 Canadian-made animated show by a little sprightly gremlin fellow named Danny Antonucci. It's the longest running CN show. It ran from 2009 to It ran from 1999 to 2009, 10 years.
It ran from 2009 to 1999. It was so
ran
long
to the
running
past.
it went backward.
Ed and Eddy it's so good it transcends time. It used to be the longest running Canadian animated series until it got recently surpassed by, I think, Troll Drama Island. I think they renewed it again, so now it's gonna.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
It'll have passed that. Yeah.
What an honor.
What an honor. So, I'm going to let Kevin take it from here, because Kevin runs a blog called, could you tell us what it's called, Kevin?
It's called Boko Scams, and it's all about secrets about the Eds.
There you go.
And, so the story begins with one of Danny's friends daring him to make something for kids because he usually worked in adult animation.
Right.
And it ended up being his most popular thing ever.
You don't say.
Wow.
At one point, Ed and Eddy is reaching something like 30 million homes or something like that. Like it got like rebroadcast in like 100 different languages.
Yeah, I know, it's really popular in like the UK and Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind
In
of
Japan too.
not long after it debuted, it was just a huge thing. And when we were discussing it previously, you had mentioned the promotion for it was kind of strange.
Yeah.
But early in its run, there was a lot of... They were really pushing that show a lot. I remember that.
They were. Didn't the pilot like air during like one of their movies, before one of their movies or something? I forget.
I'm not sure. I think, like, I didn't have Cartoon Network yet when it came out, but...
Right.
I'm pretty sure it just came out in January 1999.
Right.
And I've never heard anything special about how it premiered, just that they were, like, being very secretive with it in the commercials.
Yeah.
And they'd, like,
Very
have,
strange ad campaign.
yeah, just clips of, like, the run cycles going back and forth and saying, this is our greatest project ever.
They were usually in silhouette, if I remember right.
Yeah,
It was supposed to be... They were doing the silhouette thing for a while, then I think they revealed what the characters looked like closer to the premiere.
Yeah.
That or after it. I forget the order that went in, but I remember that distinctly.
I have to wonder why. I guess because it looks so unique, I suppose, and they didn't want to they didn't want to make it like too jarring and everything like that. They wanted to ease
Something
people
weird
in.
about it was that they didn't air the show in Canada after the second season.
Oh, really? Why?
No one knows, except that there was only like one cartoon channel in Canada.
That is really peculiar.
Yeah.
Maybe it
I
was
know
a
Canada
license.
has a rule.
Maybe it was a licensing
Sorry, go
dispute.
Maybe I know Canada has a rule against. They want a certain amount of their content to be Canadian, but that show is made in Canada, so I
Yeah.
don't get the issue.
Yeah, it was really hard for them to like not get any feedback about their show in their country. But
It's very strange.
yeah. They still picked up a
So,
big fan base despite that.
Yeah, they did. I know. I mean, obviously they have a big one here in the States.
Yeah, but like they still got the response and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, Ed and Eddy is about 3 Ed boys. If I remember right, they're based on the creator's kids, sort of.
A little bit on him and a little bit on his kids. Ed's are based on different aspects of Danny, with extra details coming from his kids who were 11 and 8 at the time of the show beginning. For example, his sons allegedly inspired the candy-stained tongues, although those were in Danny's style before the Eds. And one of his sons made that construction paper fishbowl movie they watched all the time.
Oh yeah, the one that would always show up on TVs and stuff.
And Eddy got his name from a song by the Undertones called The Girls Don't Like It, about a guy named Eddy trying to overcompensate with his car. That's a bit of new news. He just came out with that information.
Really? This like an interview or something, or a Q&A?
He's just been posting on Facebook lately. Sometimes he starts giving away background information.
Just for fun. It's like, here's something you didn't know about the show.
Yeah, he likes to reward the fans for waiting. So, another thing is, Ralph was inspired by Danny growing up as a first-generation Italian immigrant.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So, I think, like, his grandparents are especially based on, like, how Ralph talks about his grandparents. I think they're based on Danny's family.
And Rolf always kind of being nostalgic for where he came from. Because I can see that, like, him taking inspiration from something like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I noticed that Ralph's version of Santa, the Great Yeshmayek, she cooks children.
Oh my god.
So, she resembles Italy's holiday witch Befana, who brings gifts during the Feast of Epiphany. So I think there's a little bit of a connection between Ralph and Italy.
Yeah, I did not know
He's
that.
officially from no real country, but...
Yeah.
I remember there's an interview where, when they were doing when they were ending the show, well, quote-unquote ending the show.
Yeah.
I'll explain that in a bit. But, they were doing some big event for it where they had, like, actual interviews from Danny Antonucci, and he just said, like, I don't know where the heck Rolf is from. I think that's literally what he said.
Yeah, I remember that one. A lot of the characters have song-inspired names by the Undertones.
Oh.
And another one is Jimmy is inspired by Danny's pampered cousin, and his name is taken from an Undertones song called Jimmy Jimmy about a mama's boy. and and Kevin's name came from an Undertones song called My Perfect Cousin, with a little bit of his attitude observed from Danny's athletic son.
Right.
And Naz is named after
kinda
the
shocking.
60s band The Naz.
That's the only one I actually know. Because I was like, there's nobody on Earth that I ever met named Naz, so it has to be from that.
I know. What else could it be?
So, the show's interesting because it's kind of like some of it's like what he observed from like his sons and stuff like that. Or just like kid behavior in general. That's one of the things people always note about the show is that they have like weird multicolored mouths, and the reason that's because he always Antonucci always noticed how like kids would eat tons of candy and it would like change the color of their mouths, so it's kind of what he was going for.
Yeah. The show's full of...
And I think that you had mentioned he was already doing that. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it comes up a little bit because his first show, The Brothers Grunt, they were all like monsters, so they had weird mouths already.
Yeah.
And Lupo, I think, has a blue tongue.
Yeah.
He's that butcher who slaughters himself. Fun!
he swears a lot.
And, yeah.
I know the Eds are weird because there's also sort of a proto version of them, and I learned this from your blog.
Yeah.
He did like a Foot Locker commercial, right?
I have it in my notes. Let me look. It's Kids Foot Locker, and it was called Kung Shu.
It's this very weird little commercial. It's on YouTube. I'll link to it in the description. But it's this weird little commercial about these 3 kids like bullying some other kid, and they look like prototype versions of like the Eds, and with the mixture of like one of them kind of looks like Kevin a little bit too.
Yeah, and the villain looks and acts a little like Kevin, and the main Not, well, first of all, that wasn't a villain. That was just some kid.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, just some bully.
the leader of the trio was voiced by Eddy.
Yeah.
And he made very Rolf faces, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of a mixture. It's kind of like the proto state of everything that the show would become.
Yeah, it's just an amorphous blob of Edda and Eddy thoughts.
So, I guess we'll go into it by season. There's 6 seasons. It's weird to say seasons because season 6 is only like 2 episodes in a movie, technically.
Yeah.
So, but it's still a season.
Yeah.
So season 1
Yeah.
is very, very kind of weird and very rough. And I'll let Failmore kind of go into it because he was telling me about it. His like kind of observations of it. And I guess we'll see if Kevin agrees or not.
Okay.
Well, the thing that I had noticed about the first season is, like with a lot of shows, it's still kind of trying to figure itself out. It was almost like they were taking stock ideas that they had come up with
Right.
and turning them into episodes that were built much more strongly around that idea,
Yeah.
which I think made the flow of the episodes feel a little bit more stilted. But then they backed off of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, wonder what I would have thought if that was all I could watch of the show back then.
Right.
Just the first
Yeah,
season.
because I got into it during season 3, and that's, the best season in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Season 3s are always pretty good. And,
Yeah, definitely.
so season 1 is just kind of they don't really make expressions, they're well animated, but just, in a, systematic way.
Yeah, it's very standard.
Yeah.
They're still clearly trying to figure out how to put the characters in the character, if that makes any sense. How to convey their personality. It wasn't just the plot coming off as more natural as time went on. The characters themselves had to be developed and given a voice, so to
Yeah,
speak.
Naz had a different voice actor that season.
It was that Tabitha St. Germain, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot who replaced her.
Erin Fitzgerald, who's
There we
also
go.
May Kenker.
Yeah.
Huh.
I just had her double up.
Yep.
I mean, it's not really noticeable, so she did a good job.
The other Kenkers also do double voices.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, Lee is Sarah, and Marie is Kevin.
Doesn't have a very, very big cast, which makes sense considering it's not like a huge. You got your cast of characters, and that's the only ones you're ever going to see in the entire show.
Yeah,
Besides the one exception.
when they meet Eddie's brother in the end, he was originally going to have his own voice actor, and then they were just I feel like it's because of the budget, I don't know, but they just had their voice director do it instead, and he did a cool job.
Yeah, he did a fine job, I thought.
Yeah.
But season 1 is very rough. Season 1 also like most shows, there's a series Bible, and it kind of not too heavily, but it definitely diverts a lot from the Bible initially intended.
Yeah.
There's lots of weird stuff in the first episode. The first episode, everybody thinks the first episode is the one where they go to the pool. Pop goes to the Ed. It's not. It's the first one they aired, but the first one they technically produced is the one which name escapes me. The serial toucher one.
The Ed Touchables.
There we go.
Yeah, at Touchables.
And that one is, if that had been the first time, I could see why they didn't choose that one first, because that had been the first introduction to the show. I don't think it would have taken off as well as it did. It's very, very rough.
No.
I've recently heard some mixed information that it's actually wrong that they aired them out of order, but just
Interesting.
that it's gone down in history that way and they never fixed it.
Right.
Very weird.
I could believe it though, because the Ed Touchables, the animation quality feels much more piloty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I heard
It's also a lot.
Pop Goes the Ed looks a lot better.
that was something I learned recently. When they did that pilot, they only had 5 people in studio to work on it.
Yeah.
So
Oh
then
my
when it
God.
got picked up to
They-
a full series, they were like, "Oh, we can have dozens of people making this.
We can have people working on
We
this.
can be a
It can get
we
done.
can be a studio.
An AKA studio.
We're finally gonna have a hit show."
But the Untouchables also has weird stuff I know in the series Bible, Double D was supposed to have a crush on Sarah, and they obviously didn't continue that. But that episode has vestiges of that. He looks at her in a loving way at one point. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really weird. because it's never brought up again.
Yeah, season 1 like backtracks a lot from the series Bible because it mentions their parents and stuff. It mentions the school. Like, a lot of information from the series Bible is not useful until like the last season that wasn't supposed to exist.
Yeah. Which I feel like that's a byproduct of them, again, pruning ideas that did not seem to gel naturally, because you can have a series Bible, you can have all kinds of, supplemental information, ideas, and whatever, but if it just doesn't come off right, you're going to stick with what does, so they probably just prune that down, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's definitely like a budget thing to like keep the character list down.
Yeah, that's probably what they kind of considered, because like they kind of have a big like main cast, and they probably figured like there's no point to go outside of that.
And the style is like theatrical.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what he wanted. He really wanted it to be like those old like 1940s like theatrical shorts, like Looney Tunes and stuff like that. And that's kind of the reason why he kept the cast so like locked down, I guess. Because when you think of Looney Tunes, you think of that one set of characters they always they use all the time.
Yeah.
Just a handful.
Yeah.
And the plot needs to be simple and accessible.
Exactly. But that's the interesting about Ed and Eddy is that like season 1, Failmore's right. It's kind of more standard. But then, near the end of it, they started like going in different directions. Like the last episode of season 1 is kind of where I think Ed and Eddy kind of hits the stride of like what it really wants to be.
Yeah.
And it's that one where the cruise one.
Yeah.
Which is I think is a great episode.
Avasti
Yes.
Eds, I think. Which is I really like that episode, and closing in on that one, you can see it start to go from like their routines to here's a story that's just all its own.
Yeah.
We're not making a giant stink bomb. We're not being Bart Simpson flushing a cherry bomb down the toilet at school.
No.
We're gonna do this goofy creek cruise thing on an inner tube.
And I love when Johnny jumps into that water and that shot from under him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of really interesting animation.
The first time I saw that,
really visually striking things in it.
I was like 10 when I first saw that, and I remember thinking like, I want to see this in a movie theater.
Yeah. That's the other thing that kind of sets it apart from other shows is that they were trying like lots of like really like complex theatrical things even right out the gate.
Yeah, it's an art show for sure.
Definitely. What do you think of like the style of like I always ask about people, so like obviously Ed and Eddy didn't invent squiggle vision, but it's definitely when people think of it, that's definitely one of the first shows they think of. And I think because of that I think Ed and Eddy probably has the best example of squiggle vision. I think for me personally, when I see it in other shows, they either do it too much or not enough.
Yeah, I haven't really seen many other examples. All I can think of was Home Movies and some other things by them.
Dr. Katz, the same guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had some other thing that was like a lawyer show, I think.
Oh, God.
I don't remember that one by name, but I do know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I'll have to look that up later. The thing with Ed and Eddy's squiggle vision, when you think of Dr. Katz, it almost looks like somebody just took the pencil tool on MS Paint and drew the lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Lines are all over the place. Home Movies doesn't do it quite so much, and it has smoother outlines.
It was only in the first season.
But with Ed and Eddy,
Also,
what's that?
Yeah, it was just the first season. He's right.
Yeah, because later on, Home Movies, I remember that now, they stopped wiggling. But in Ed and Eddy, you have these outlines that are very thick, they have a lot of organic shapes to them, they're not pixelated, they're not pencil-like or rough, they actually look good, each individual frame looks good, and when they're moving, they're alternating back and forth between all these outlines, it doesn't look like the character's trying to, like, fly away or something. It doesn't turn into a Kennedy Cartoons episode.
No.
Yeah, with the other styles, it's more like they are just shaking the shape of the line.
Yeah.
But with Ed and Eddy, it's all about, like, the inking, and the line itself is staying the same shape.
It stays along a certain form, which I think the show does really well in general. I think Ed and Eddy is such a great case for just knowing how technical drawing is so important for animation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to soapbox here, but I do think it's kind of a lost art a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think Ed and Eddy is like perfect because like it's such a loose, crazy style. But when you actually kind of sit down and analyze it, it's lots of they put so much thought into every frame of it. They do just like the 3 character designs they have, like which is just the Eds. It's like they exaggerate things a lot all the time. That's one thing the show is known for, where they're always pulling all these crazy faces and things like that. But we talked about it a bit when we talked about Rocco. They lock down certain features so it's not like it's exaggerated, but it's not like out of place. It feels right because they keep certain things consistent and then exaggerate other parts of the face or the body or whatever.
Right.
I think Ed and Eddy
It
is
doesn't
masterful
look
at
or
it.
feel like a mistake.
No.
Yeah, there's a weird, like, just unspoken laws about what's on model and off model in Ed and Eddy, and it's, like, really surprising to hear the things that look good on paper but just are not official Ed and Eddy drawings.
Yeah, they adhere to the style they have, like, I think pretty much consistently throughout the entire run. I can't think of many drawings in it where I'm like, oh, that's off model. It's very rare. And if
Or at least situations where it's like, oh, that's an error.
yeah,
Somebody messed that up.
and even then, I only can think of that in like the very early episodes of season 1. They kind of chill. They don't really screw up much stuff beyond that point.
Yeah, the wiggling effect is meant as, like, a tribute to human error, and
Yeah.
it's like you can't draw the same thing more than once, and it helps the show stay loose and sketchy even during the later seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's very just like right to the point of what the show's all about, like the thesis of its style.
By like season 2 and 3 are kind of where people say are like that's like the best point of the show. I'm gonna agree with Kevin here. I think season 3 is the best season. I think it has every episode. That's when they got the most creative with a lot of episode like premises.
Yeah, it's very solid season. Like everything is just jokes. I once just like went through all the episode descriptions and noticed that there's like no episodes where Kevin's really mean to them. There's a lot of episodes where Kevin gets beat up in season 3, and I love it.
Yeah, that sounds so weird out of context.
Especially because my name is Kevin.
Yeah,
Yeah, the time that you got beat up and
I
Ed
loved
and Eddy.
it. It was the best. And what else was good in season 3?
season 3 is my favorite episode actually.
Is it the camera one?
That one's really great, but actually no, I'm gonna say the one where they need to get to the candy store on time. That one's like, I think that's the episode that like fucking solidifies everything I like about the show.
That's actually near the beginning of season 4, but when it was all airing, they mixed it into season 3.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, that kind of makes sense now I think about it. It feels like a later Ed and Eddy one, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's a really good episode. I feel like they could have like stretched that into a full half-hour story.
They could have, yeah, easily.
They could have done that, and I'm almost glad that they didn't, just because it keeps the episode really tightly focused.
It does.
But if they wanted to, they easily could have, and it would have been a lot of fun.
The one they did that with is I mean, they did it a couple of times, but the first one they ever did that with was what's it called? The one where Jimmy frames them.
It's called If It Smells Like an Ed, and it's actually, I
There you
think,
go.
the episode right before the one we were just talking about.
Yeah. They're both very interesting episodes.
Yeah. I loved that so much when it came out. I thought they would never do a double-length one. And,
Yeah, me too.
I know people don't really like how it ends, because it's a pretty mean episode, but...
Yeah, well,
I think the jokes
it
really
starts
get
out
to
kind
the
of
nature of the
mean,
show.
it does. Yeah, kids are cruel.
I love when
think it's kind
Ed
of
eats that log.
it's very sad. I don't know what it is. It's very satisfying to watch,
Yeah,
and also weird.
he's like enjoying it so much. Let him do it.
You brought up the camera one, the one that had the camcorder, right?
Yeah.
Hey, talk about it one more time. I'll be right back one last time. I swear.
Okay. He'll be alright.
I'm trying to remember that one, because that's one that I did not watch in preparation for this, and I haven't seen it in a very long time. But also, was there not a episode that revolved around a Polaroid?
Yeah, that was in season 1.
Okay, so then there's a camcorder one
Yes,
also.
that's in season 3. And the camcorder one is interesting because it's mostly done with no music. So it's like just this is what their world is really like. And
Yeah.
I mean, you don't learn much. I think the most you learn is like that Eddie's brother used to like rule the junkyard, stuff like that.
Isn't he trying to record something to impress him?
Yeah, he got a package from his brother that was all like diapers and stuff, so he's like, I need to show my brother that I'm not still a baby. But
So yeah, he filmed
It's also
himself.
one of the only episodes that I can recall that was done primarily in a first-person type of perspective.
yeah. And there was actually a deleted scene in the movie where they were going to reference that video,
Oh, interesting.
and they were just going to be like all anticipating him to talk to them about it, and it would turn out that it's been sitting in his mail all this time and he never checked.
Oh.
Aw, that's sad.
I'm surprised they mailed it. Every clip was them getting beat up.
Yeah. Well, we gotta do something with it.
I guess so.
My favorite episode,
Alright.
Scrambled Egg.
Oh yeah, that's a
Oh,
good
that
one.
one's good.
When they try to make the sea ranch, and Double D
He's asleep.
has not had any sleep. What was he doing? He was making a Golden Gate Bridge out of
toothpicks.
popsicle sticks
Out
or
of
something.
toothpicks, yeah.
Toothpicks.
Yeah.
And then they inadvertently wind up clogging the creek with a bunch of junk. Why isn't there a lot of really good episodes involving the
Yeah.
creek?
I don't know.
It-
It's just kind of a good location for that kind of stuff.
It's the namesake for their town, and
Yeah.
it's smart to include it.
One of my favorite lines in the show is in that episode where Double D is just like, "Persistent, aren't we?" Something like that, and made me laugh.
Yeah, I say that
The way
a
he
lot.
delivers it is what does it.
There's a,
That's one thing to talk about. I think that show is some of the best voice acting I've ever heard in a cartoon.
oh yeah, in season 3 there's that great Double D line where he goes, "That's disturbing.
Oh, is that when
What happened to the stairs?"
Ed is sleepwalking?
Yeah.
No.
No. I think he says something similar. No, he goes like, "You ate Jim" in that one, in a similar inflection.
Yeah.
But I like the one that he's talking about where Ed's grounded, so his parents took the stairs away.
Oh yeah. He says that's disturbing. Okay, I'm thinking of a similar line then.
Yeah.
There's one where they took Sarah's diary and Double D goes, "My mind is riddled with disturbing images."
I think Double D might be my favorite voice on the show because I think he has like some of the best delivery and some of the best lines in the whole show.
Yeah.
It's just like unintentionally funny things that he says.
Even down to the movie, he has my favorite little bit lines. I like when he's trying to open the jelly beans and he goes, "I am a bit peckish. A stubborn lid, this."
He's just so neurotic and pedantic with the way that he talks, but he's also very shrill and kind of fast talking.
Yeah. That's another thing
They,
too.
they
Everybody-
take that archetypical nerd and they make it funny.
Yeah.
I'm usually not a fan of that kind of character, but I think they nail it in Ed and Eddy.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers to Double D.
Here's another thing I read off your blog. That's something I always kind of thought about with those characters is that like people always say like, well, if it wasn't for Eddy, people would like Ed and Double D, and it's like no, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
I think Pop Goes to Ed does a good job of demonstrating that, where like Eddie tells them to mingle or something like that, so they go off and like start talking about pig heads or whatever, and
scene
they,
is
they freak out
perfect.
everybody else. Yeah, I think it sums up why they're friends really well.
Yeah. It's just Double
Yeah,
D and Ed like Gore too much. They can't handle the other kids.
They can.
Well, Ed's talking about a monster movie, and Double D is talking about a surgery or something, like a documentary about a surgery or
But they
something.
end up lining up.
Yeah, they're both talking about
And then they're both at a
Yeah.
food table.
Double D's dissecting a pig head.
It's a very interesting, like the way they handle characters in this show.
Yeah.
Because like so many shows are just like it's either you have like more character driven things or you have slapstick. That's kind of how they did it.
Yeah.
And like I think the only, and Ed and Eddy is such a perfect mixture of both. I think the only other thing we've really seen do that properly is like the Chuck Jones shorts from like the '60s and stuff, where they start really exploring like the Looney Tunes characters, but there's also still like slapstick things happening. I think Ed and Eddy is another really great mixture of that you don't really see anymore.
Yeah, I wrote down some of their like philosophies for how to direct the animation, and
Go for it.
one I really like is it's not what they do, it's how they do it. And that's like about how like you don't want it to be just a sitcom that happens to be animated. It has to be stuff that could only happen to cartoons. The other one I like is the guideline for the series is stay by Eddy at the end of the first episode. Childhood trauma builds character. And it just effortlessly foreshadows his doomed relationship with his brother in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel like I should save my favorite slogan for when he gets back, but it's fuck digital. And that one is like, I think they've printed it on shirts for the artists sometimes. And,
oh my God.
They actually hid it in backgrounds during the digital era of the show.
Holy shit.
There's...
Where did they hide it?
I actually just posted a picture of one today, in the episode A Town Called Ed, when they find out that Eddy's family built the town. They walk through the junkyard, and in one of the mountains, there's just a buried sign that says CK Digital. And then in the movie, they just hid a sign in the junkyard, and then later under the waterfall, both just say digital. But they just keep really disposing of anything digital in really bad ways.
Yeah, which is... It's funny because, obviously they were very committed to doing animation traditionally.
Yeah.
And out of everybody to make the transition, they did it the most gracefully, they did it the most effectively, and it seems like they got the most mileage out of it. Maybe holding off that long and staying committed to traditional principles, which I feel like is something that's kind of gone out the window for one reason or another.
Yeah.
By sticking with their guns in a digital medium, they were able to still pull off a lot of really good animation and a lot of really good stuff that wasn't possible before.
I think one of their most important principles that makes it like the golden era of animation is animation by mistake. Just embracing all the errors that come with it.
Which, of course, is made more possible by the style.
Exactly. Let's see, I'm looking at more of my notes.
Well, one other thing I was going to mention really quick, we had very, very briefly touched on the use of archetypes as characters.
Yeah.
There are a lot of stock characters, but they push it far enough to where you don't really notice.
Right.
You barely notice by, especially after the first few episodes when they're no longer writing the stock archetypes quite as hard. Like we were talking about Double D's character, for example.
Yeah.
The thing that puts him apart from the typical, like, Melvin character, the nerd, he's a lot more proactive.
Yeah. I think around Season 3, really it starts in Season 2, but just, like, the beginning of the show is all about finding who Double D is. He's kind of vague in the first season.
Yeah, I would even say Ed is kind of vague. Like, he's kind of just dumb guy. I mean, you could arguably say he stays dumb guy.
His voice is a lot different in the beginning.
Yeah, he's way more stilted. They all kind of are, but him especially is, like, very stilted in his delivery.
He sounds a lot more like he's just a normal kid. He sounds like he might even be cool.
Doesn't have a whole lot of personality.
Let's see. I have some information about the reason the animation came out so good in the show.
What's that?
It owes some of its best-looking sequences from the original Cell animated seasons up until the Christmas special to overseas supervising director Sheldon Arnst, a master animator who closely follows the standards of Richard Williams' Animator's Survival Guide.
Like, not only that show is like, not only is it like super well animated, like to the point of like I even at the time there wasn't really much like it. They also did things that like I don't think anybody else would really do. Like they did all these really complex shots that just got more complex as the show kept going. Like you talk about that one in Avasti Eds with Johnny in the water. It's like that's just like the first the fucking tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
They go absolutely nuts with it in later seasons.
Yeah.
There's one.
What?
There's an episode where it's not one of my favorites, but I like it enough. It's the one where Rolf challenges Eddy to some kind of bravery competition, and they want to win like stamps. And it's just an episode just full of slapstick, but it's like the whole ending bit with the train is really well done.
Yeah, that one's after Sheldon left the show, but like,
Oh wow.
yeah, episodes like that, I think that one's like mostly a Scott Diggs Underwood sort of episode, and he like really took over the style.
He did.
He kept it strong in the final years. And I love that train sequence too. That's one of the coolest looking things they ever designed.
It's also the only time you ever see a train in the show.
Yeah.
It just sort of appears.
Yeah. You find out a lot about.
Well, even when they're just kind of going about their business and whatever, normal scenes, there are Dutch angles everywhere. There's a lot of overhead shots that show a very wide area and perspective.
Yeah, they're so creative.
They did all kinds of stuff with their scenery and with their camera. They kept the camera moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's something very rare in like kids cartoons.
my favorite shots are when they like animate the backgrounds too, and I love that they still do that in the digital era.
Yeah, I mean they did it a smart way too, where like they kept like the way they kind of drew the backgrounds. It's not as distinguishable. You watch like a show and it's like you can tell they have like background paintings, but when they start animating the backgrounds, like you can tell it's obviously animated. They did the smart thing.
FUD flag.
Yeah, exactly. It's really apparent.
They made the storyboarders actually like draw the backgrounds as perfect as they could. So every step they needed like the style to be on point.
Everything is like so locked down from step to step. It's one of the few shows I see where like if you read the storyboard, it's like 1-to-1. Like they're like exactly how the show looks.
Yeah. And do you remember the one where they did the what was it? It was a time capsule?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some part where at the end Double D's talking about how he wants it to be a tribute to like bygone days and stuff like that, and there's just like all these little arm movements. They're being really intricate about how he acts, and it's really good stuff.
That's a great character acting in general.
Yeah. And we owe all that to Sheldon Ernst, and they referenced him in the show in seasons 4 and 6 as Ed's Lucky Cheese Chunk Sheldon.
That's a nice one. So, what do you think of the school seasons? Because that's when people start to say the quality drops off. I personally don't agree, actually, but let me see what you think, Kevin. That's when the show definitely takes a big shift. I'm curious how they kind of thought about it going in, the crew.
Yeah. What I wrote down is, many fans are still upset about the show deciding to switch to school stories during the digital years. But it's well documented behind the scenes that the writers and storyboarders were stumped, frustrated, and irritated trying to push the characters in any new directions under the limitations. And I remember reading, the interviews around that time for season 4, they would just, talk about how they were pushing the characters, but when you look at the episodes, there's not really anywhere to push them except yelling.
Yeah, exactly.
So at the end of the summer stories, it's like they're already obnoxious, it's hard to like them anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel...
You're getting into latter-day SpongeBob territory.
Exactly.
You're flanderizing him, but...
So I really respect AKA's decision to reboot itself a little bit. And especially because they would always talk about hating reboots, and for a while they didn't want to go past season 4 at all. But, they just really cared about the idea and the characters, and they wanted to see where else it could go. And so I like that they tried to make it a show that has more openness to world building and exposing the pressures that made the characters who they are.
Yeah.
They get into flashbacks for the first time. There's a little bit of origin stories. It makes sense.
There's the one in their not clip show episode, because it's not technically a clip show episode, but it's presented like it is one.
Yeah.
But they introduce how the Eds meet for the first time, which you never saw up until that point. And
Right.
Oh,
it's this very silly memory.
were you saying that was in the clip show episode?
Was that in the clip show episode, or was that a different
That
episode?
was in the flashback episode,
Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry.
where they kept, like, pulling the side of the screen over and jumping into a flashback.
There we go.
So, yeah,
There we
I
go.
loved that flashback.
It's a really creative way of transitioning into one, too.
Yeah, and that was, like, the beginning of Season 5, so they were just like, this is the season where we get to the meat of the show.
Mm-hmm.
They told us about where Jimmy got his retainer and stuff like that.
By eating a bowling ball.
As you do.
As you do.
Completely normal behavior.
To be fair, they gave him a cornucopia, which I don't know. I didn't even think kids knew about that. So it was weird seeing that in a show.
The cornucopia.
Yeah, just he's like, a cornucopia, and he bites in as a bowling ball. He smashes his teeth. I was like, ooh.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I personally did not think the quality dropped in the school episodes at all. I think that rather it's just, here's a different subject matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's just a different take.
Here's a different setting. They're in school now, and we're going to be watching them in this different environment. It's no longer kids running around outside all the time. It's I don't know, had a different tone and a different context.
I think Kevin kind of hit on that. I think it's more personal, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's less about the scenario and more about the characters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't have any problems with that, I'm actually kind of glad they ended it with
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any further it could go without, like, breaking the context of the show anymore.
Exactly.
Like,
this
what
is
else
going to
can you
turn
do
into like
without
slice
seeing
of
more
life, and
adults?
we don't want that out of a
No.
Ed and Eddy show.
No. I think the fun of Ed and Eddy is how they have these likable characters in the context of like these silly slapstick plots.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, like, so Ed and Eddy's weird. It has 3 endings.
Yeah.
So there's the. Correct me if I'm wrong, but season 4 ends with the old people episode.
Yes.
All right. So that was proposed to be the final episode of the show, which is such a strange ending for the show, where they imagine what Eddy gets a nasty bump to the noggin, and he imagines, and in his weird little coma or whatever, he imagines him and his friends when they're old. And
All the neighborhood kids.
all the neighborhood kids, and they're all weird because they can't have adults, so they're just like, well, they'll be the adults then.
Yeah.
So
and
they.
and then the end of that episode is like the latest chronological moment in the timeline because that's when they're all like 102.
Yeah.
And apparently Eddy still keeps his parents' house and his clothes.
Yeah. And his room and everything else.
Nothing changed.
That's Eddy.
Except them.
That's an Eddy thing to do.
Yeah.
I could buy it.
And what else was I gonna say about that one? I remember it was really frustrating because they like released all of the season 4 episode descriptions long before they came out. They were
Right.
coming out in other countries first and stuff.
Yeah, they're very weird about how they aired it here.
Yeah, we were always getting it last for some reason. And so I remember the description made it sound like the Eds are just gonna talk about their futures and stuff like that, and it seemed like that would be really
me too,
cool.
actually.
That would be a great introspective episode, and instead it's just kind of like a screw you joke with, haha, they're all old people and we can just draw them the same but
Yeah.
wrinkly.
Yeah. It's a very strange episode. I would still say it's a funny episode in some regards. I like old man Kevin running a stupid rascal.
Yeah, now that I'm over the pain, I'm a little bit more... I like a lot of little details in it. I love the whole thing with them trying to come up with careers for the kids.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of good, like,
Yeah, that
series
was
finale touches.
Was that a separate episode?
Well,
There's another
it was-
episode that deals with the same subject matter, yes.
No, it was the same episode, but it was, like, their second full-length story, so it had, like, half of it seemed like the
Right.
career counseling episode, and the other half was their future.
Oh, you're right.
And Johnny wants to grow up to be a gopher.
You know, like you do.
Perfect career for him.
So then so the show went on for 2 more seasons. Technically, I guess one more season, season 5. So season 5 ends with a fistful of Ed.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was billed to be the last episode of the show, and to the point where they had a big event for it too. Like it was like a whole weekend. I remember this as a kid. There was like a whole weekend long marathon where they played. That was oh my god, that was 10 years ago when this happened.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago last month.
Yeah. Oh god. Oh.
Yeah.
Now we're the
So
old
that
man.
was
2007 was like 40 years ago.
that was called the best day ever. They were making fun of the SpongeBob marathon, the best day ever, where they did the same
Which
thing.
was embarrassing. I remember that one too. And it was the same year.
You know what's weird?
That one was lame because it was here's every episode of the show, but then it plays a really boring 15-minute episode afterwards.
Yeah. A Fistful of Ed I love, though. That's like one of my favorites.
I think it's one of the episodes. I think it's probably one of the best ones in the series.
My friend Raven storyboarded on that, and I love her work.
Oh, she's
She
great.
does the best faces on the show.
She does. I don't know what she's done since then, but she's done like her work on that is like really really.
She
good.
did a lot of good work on Steven Universe.
There we
I think
go.
she's leaving this season.
I'm not the biggest fan of that show, but the stuff I've seen, the shots she's done in that show is like some of the best I've seen from it easily.
Yeah, she's since day one, she's been my favorite artist on the show by like miles.
Definitely.
And an interesting thing about A Fistful of Ed was that it wasn't really the last episode of the season. They did the season. I mean, they did one. They did the season 1 episode short.
Right.
And most seasons were 13, and that one was only 12. And then the 13th episode, I think they used that for the season 6 episode.
They did, yeah.
Right.
It's the one they go to prom, I'm pretty sure.
And then, the Alien special.
Yeah, which was part of this larger event where they had a bunch of different Cartoon Network. It was a crossover thing where they had all these different Cartoon Network shows do like little Alien episodes that kind of semi-intertwined, but not really.
Yeah, I remember in My Gym Partner's a Monkey, they had like a magazine with Double D on it getting abducted.
Yeah. I was like, that's weird.
And then Billy and Mandy ended with like Ed was captured by one of their aliens and sitting with a bunch of other characters.
Yeah.
Oh, and Plank is an alien, by the way.
Oh, right, you got the...
In case you didn't
That's
notice.
Billy Mandy. It makes sense.
The signs were all there.
I mean, he did go mad that one time.
Oh, he did go mad.
But yeah, see, that episode is like that's probably like the most personal one of the show, I would say, besides the film, obviously. It really gets into kind of how Double D operates.
Yeah, and do you know about the deleted scene from the movie that was going to tie into it?
The dodgeball thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can explain it, go ahead.
I wrote it down, so I will read that.
I got you.
Okay, so there was, the campfire scene in the movie.
Yeah.
So they deleted an extra bit where they sat around it and talked. And the first thing was that Eddie was going to just tell some lies about his brother so that he wouldn't have to tell his confession at the end. Right. And so Double D's thing was the meat of the scene. And he removes his hat to show how comfortable he is with Ed and Eddie. And unlike earlier in the film, they are now respectful and don't react at all to his head. Of course, for the audience, his head is blocked by a tree branch. But the real secret would be that he hides evidence of the dodgeball incident inside his hat. A secret from the series Bible that only ever came up in one old episode. We learned in the school episodes that Double D moved to Peach Creek when they were toddlers. So apparently in his old town, he was a toddler who moved up a couple grades, and the other kids would target him in dodgeball. The twist is that part is not the traumatic experience. The motivation behind Double D's moral fiber turns out to actually be guilt from building a dodgeball bazooka and essentially going on a school shooting with it.
Which made me always wonder, like, is that why they cut that?
Well, they weren't going to show it. He was just going to show them the article in his hat, which shows him as a toddler in handcuffs being forced to give a public apology into microphones.
Yeah, that's how when I heard that, I was like, maybe that's why they cut that, because I feel like that might have been too much.
But it, like, implies why his parents don't talk to him, why he's, like, such a... What would you call it, like, type A? Just...
Yeah, type B.
He needs to control everything.
Yeah. He's very meticulous. He's a very sad character, like, looking back retrospectively. Like, the only way he can communicate to his parents are through, like, sticky notes, and just, like, he has this weird backstory that's kind of alluded to, like, once or twice.
Yeah.
That it's the reason for his being. It's such a strange character that you think this show wouldn't really have, but it's there.
Yeah.
I think they're all kind of sad, really. Eddie and Double D. Maybe not Ed so much.
No, Ed's got Sarah, and he has those nightmares about his mom, and...
Yeah, he seems to have a very odd relationship with his parents. I've heard people call it abusive. I don't think it's that necessarily.
Well, it's neglectful.
It's not great.
They leave him in a basement filled with, like, poisonous mushrooms and stuff.
But I always thought was that his choosing, or was that them though?
What?
That's kind of like because I always thought he was the weirdo who'd want to, like, be down there, and that's why he put himself in the basement.
Oh, I'm sure he loves it.
Yeah,
that's the weird thing about Ed, that he chooses to love his situation.
Yeah, I guess to makes him a likable character in that kind of sense.
Yeah,
he kind of goes with the flow.
He gets to be in his basement, surrounded by movie posters and other paraphernalia like that. Sponges, a wall full of sponges.
The bed, I don't know how he sleeps in, because there's a part where they pull the blankets off and it's just a big hole in it, and like a bumper car, like the bumper from a car underneath. I was like, Jesus Christ.
There's a snake.
Yeah.
My theory is that it's Eddie's brother's snake that always breaks out of that car.
Oh my god.
We cracked the code.
We figured it out.
Oh my god.
And you know that snake was in
too.
another episode too, right?
Yeah, it was. I always thought it was just because they just reused the model for the snake, but, like, you know what? I like your theory better. I could totally see him doing that.
It keeps breaking
Yeah,
out.
it's the same snake every time. In its first appearance, it had X's for eyes, which I think is a weird way to draw a snake.
I guess I thought it was funny. He looks dead.
It's dead.
They don't show animals much in that show.
They really don't.
I always thought that was a strange thing. Like, sometimes you see, like, the most you ever see is that snake and a dog, and sometimes a squirrel. I think it's kind of... And bunnies at one time.
Rolf's animals are what you see the most.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one time they had hippos.
Wilfred, the pig.
Wilfred and Victor, the goat.
I love Victor the best.
he's very funny looking.
Oh, chickens. You see chickens.
Yeah, Chicken Stampede.
I always thought it was weird they showed Wilfred, like, the way Rolf treats Wilfred in the movie is kind of something I'm surprised they aired. I mean, it's cartoony enough, but it's kind of like.
I always feel like, why is this a story?
Yeah, it's such an odd subplot.
It seems like it's more about the pig than about Rolf, so it's just like, where did this idea come from?
I can't help but wonder if maybe that was supposed to go somewhere initially, but maybe it was cut or something.
At one point, I know that they wanted it to, like, intertwine with Sarah and Jimmy, that, like, Sarah and Jimmy initially are just to tie in the cankers, and then they tie back into Rolf. Mm-hmm. But Danny wanted to keep everyone separate for the whole movie.
Yeah, kind of explore them more.
Yeah, it's a theme, I guess.
That's kind of what Fistful of Ed in the movie do that really well, where it's like, here's these kind of characters you've seen for, like, about a decade at this point, and now you're kind of you've got bits and pieces of what they're all about before, but here's the first time they're really left to their devices and kind of seeing what they're like.
Yeah,
I think my favorite parts about the movie is just how, like, Kevin and Naz interact.
Yeah, I love that subplot
because you kind of see what they really are. Yeah, it's very atypical of the show, but I like it a lot. Because you kind of just see what Kevin is without, like, Ed's around.
And we never get to spend time with Naz, so that's just, like, finally.
Yeah.
Which, granted, I think if you're watching the show, especially if you were in the original age group, you know, when it was airing for the first time, you're not exactly watching it for the characters.
No, definitely not.
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of people probably remember the later seasons a little less favorably.
Yeah.
Just because they were not they were not really the target of those episodes anymore.
I definitely get the impression that people really gravitate to like the tone of the old episodes and just that it represents something about their life. And
Definitely.
and there's less of a focus on like continuity and stuff. They don't want there to be, I guess, a story. Some people just like for it to be a standalone thing, but I feel like I love the way the later seasons start piling on information.
I think they transition to it really well. A lot of shows kind of goof it, but I think the way the Eds kind of handle it is that, like, I think the way you explained before, it's like they're kind of realizing like, we don't know where to take it, so let's just take it in a whole different direction rather than either rebooting it or just canning it or going the same direction we already were and just driving into the ground. They did the smart thing. It's like, let's just take it. Let's just see how far we can push it another way.
Yeah.
And it's another example of them sticking the landing again with the transition, because it seems like everybody's favorite dead horse to beat lately is shows that go from episodic to continuous. And they didn't go full on continuous. You know, it wasn't all about like plot arcs or whatever, but they did manage to pull it off in a way that was not frustrating. And that is admirable. Because the thing that I've said, you know, so many shows have actually pulled off that transition just fine and wound up being great shows for it. But that requires that you have a
and also just like
screenwriter.
good people who just kind of understand. Just really people. You need someone just there who understands what your show's all about. In the end of the day, as long as it maintains that core identity, it's all that matters.
Yeah, good director and good writers are crucial.
When I watch the like season 6 episodes at the end of the show, I think those are like some of their best directed episodes. Just so many details just everywhere. Like, I feel like they really grasped all the characters and like learned everything they could from each episode of the show. And that's what I like to see. And I think season 5 stumbles at times, but I think in the end,
certainly their episodes aren't great. I would say, looking back,
I think collectively it turns into something good, though. It ends up benefiting the series that it happened.
I think the animation, that's the we were saying about like digital, is that like when they realize when they hit digital, as much as they fought against it, so most of the show was done in a cell animation, the old-fashioned way. Eventually, the costs of doing that were too great, so CN eventually was like, you switch to let us do this digitally, or we pull the plug. And they finally just said fine, and they fought against it. But like they ultimately, like, I think that's the best the show ever looked when they kind of realized it, at least animation wise, is that they realized like we can do all these things in digital way easier than we could before. So let's push it as far as we can take this now, because now we're dealing with a whole new environment. We're dealing with a new lease on these characters. So. And we were dealing with new technology and software we didn't have before. So I think that's when the show started looking a lot more like it was already ambitious, but they got crazy with like some of the sequences in seasons 5 and 6.
One of the big differences in the style is that I think they lost the budget for when it went digital. They couldn't have their overseas director anymore, Sheldon Arnst.
Yeah.
And so what happened was that they started focusing the storyboard directors to learn how to direct animation as well, and then
exactly.
If you notice in those later episodes, they start like adding an extra beat to the opening credits so that they can credit a storyboard director and then the rest of the artists on the episode.
Yeah.
And before then, they just had like the storyboarders, and that was the only credit. And they wouldn't really talk about the animation director at all, but now the animation director was controlling everything. It was like it would go, like, straight to design and stuff, too, I think. Because, the storyboarders were the ones who, like, really created the style and figured out how it works. And so, like, they could draw them better than anyone, and then I feel like a lot of the drawings look so good in those later episodes.
They're like there's some really like really expressive drawings, some really crazy, like not off model, but like really pushing what the model can do.
Their designers are like
drawings.
tattoo artists too and stuff. Like,
oh wow, that explains a lot actually.
One of their writers, Jono Howard, is a DJ.
That does explain a lot.
They live very interesting
the
lives.
crew-
Danny's a biker.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, looking at the guy, I'm like, that guy looks like a biker.
It's hard to miss.
Yeah, I don't know. The crew behind that show is one I don't hear people talk about that much. They seem like I mean, not to say that no other crew is like this, but like they seem like such passionate individuals, and they really seem to really care about what they were doing.
Yeah. Do you know that most of them are like, I don't know if they're still working, but last I heard they were mostly on My Little Pony.
Yeah, they all kind of transitioned over to like they either work on My Little Pony. I know a lot of them work on the Mickey Mouse shorts that Disney does. Some of them work there too.
I've heard a little about that.
Yeah,
and
they're still around.
that movie Sausage Party had a lot of Ed and Eddy artists on it.
Yeah,
I didn't see it, but
Yeah.
you know what? I'm not a fan of the movie, but it looks nice, so maybe that's attributed to them. I wish they probably didn't get paid very well though, because apparently people didn't get paid too.
yeah, I think that's more of like an overseas thing. But yeah, I keep feeling like maybe I'd like to watch the movie muted.
I'd recommend. Yeah, you know what? Sure. That's definitely that's a viable way.
Put
Alright.
Ren and Stimpy production music on over it.
Actually, like, we didn't even talk about the music of Ed and Eddy. What do you know why they chose the music they did? Because I always felt like they were trying to go for something like a classic feel, and that's why they did it.
Yeah, it's Patrick Caird. I think that's how he pronounces his name.
I think so. Yeah.
And he's worked with Danny for a really long time. He focuses on jazz. I think I forgot to look up what his small orchestra is, but it's probably like 4 people or something. Yeah. And he's just always worked with Danny, and they try to keep that style consistent. And I remember they said that they had the theme song planned out before like most of the actual stuff for the show, before the series Bible and everything. They were just like,
it's a good thing.
They heard Big Noise from Winnetka, which I think is Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
And that has a whole whistling section, so they started copying that, and Patrick made it into their soundtrack, and it became the whole format for the show, and Cartoon Network loved it.
Nice. It definitely has like this big brassy feel to it.
Yeah.
Which I think it's like a lot like you think of like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah.
Always really had that feeling to it. I think it's what they really wanted to go for.
I'm musically inept, so I can't go into too much detail, but
me too.
I've heard that
Don't worry.
The Old People episode, the one that ended season 4, for those future scenes, they made the music like more of an old-fashioned version of jazz.
They did.
And
yeah, it's more like 40s-ish.
Yeah, and I think there's another scene like that. Oh, I think I'm thinking of the Valentine special. They have like a lot more violin music in that one. Sometimes they do special episodes that are like change the music style a little, and I like that a lot.
The obvious one is the Christmas one. They have like little jingle bells.
Yeah, and they use a lot of piano, which is only sometimes Eddy's instrument. That's like his when he's being honest instrument.
Yeah, he's being sad. There's that one where he's walked away from Kevin's house, and there's like this he's got the little light in his pocket. He's gone to the tree. You can hear like this really like sad dinky piano playing.
Yeah, I love that scene so much. It's so quiet. I love when they do quiet scenes.
It's very rare when they do it. It's oddly, you know, it's powerful. I don't know what it is, but it works. It's resonant.
Didn't they use that instrument when the episode where they're trying to get to the candy store, when Eddy's trying to decide if he's going to go into the chicken stampede to get Double D,
yeah, I think they did,
or to go into the candy store.
They did. This scene is so tense because of that.
Yeah, and he like gets all up in the camera and begs with his fingers all dirty.
Yeah.
Begs for forgiveness, but he will receive none.
One other thing I was just wanting to bring up real fast before we start to wrap up. The appeal of the show, which is something we've kind of touched on a few times. When the show had first come out, I found it very relatable, because in my neighborhood, there used to be, some neighborhood kids, all of which moved away, actually, which sucked. But while they were still there, we would actually go out into our yard, and it was either going to be my backyard or the side yard or the neighbor's backyard or whatever, And we would just put stuff together. And, you know, the whole pretend thing, that element of the show, them putting together all these really elaborate, I want to say sets, but they're just the dumb scams they're trying to pull. That reminded me a lot of that. Just running out and doing, putting something together from whatever junk you happen to have in your garage.
I love how the show dabbles in the social decay in, like, suburbia, but treats boredom as, like, a source of creativity. It's like there's a weird little level of positivity to how negative their world is.
Well, if I remember correctly, there's another thing too where they were pretty adamant about keeping things kind of old-fashioned.
Kids go out and play. They're not playing. You don't really ever see them play games. You don't see them watching TV that much.
There's no internet, very few computers, and usually it's something that Double D has put together out of like a milk carton.
Yeah, they're pretty trapped in like the late 80s, early 90s.
And in a way where you can tell it's not really meant to be that period, but it invokes it.
The latest date referenced in the show was 1998, and that was in the last season. And the movie also uses a 2000, but you never really know if that's just because 2000's a cool number.
Yeah, 2000 is a cool number. Remember when everything was 2000 for like the whole year of 2000?
Yeah.
Everything was 2000 for like the whole fucking decade leading up to it.
I remember South Park made fun of that, where every episode of the season that year was whatever the episode title was in 2000.
I love that.
But I'll agree with Failmore. I think the show is as outlandish as it is. It's weirdly relatable. Like you go out and hang out with your friends by your on the sidewalk in the alley next to the fences. That's what I would do as a kid, and we would just be assholes and we'd break stuff and hit each other. But that's just what kids do. Like they just mess around, they roughhouse, but then they hang out afterwards. It's just kind of, kids are fickle little creatures and they're assholes, but like they become good people, they become bad people, and that's kind of what I always got from Eddy and Eddy. It's kind of...
the characters are weirdly realistic, and as for what they do, there's I guess you could call it a blanket fort mentality to it.
When the show switched to school episodes, that was like when I was going into high school, and I could not relate to that more, just how much they hated it. And just felt judged by everybody. Like, they nailed the experience. Could not have happened at a better time for me.
If the episode where like they just go when like they realize summer's over is like one of the most like.
I love how dramatic it is when the like hurricane blows summer away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got all the central air units out to make the cul-de-sac warm, and they painted the trees. And there's a grill, and they have tires. They're pretending like pieces of a tire.
And it's clever as a way of just like, it's a clever lampooning of like, hey, it can't be summer forever from the show, but it's also just like, that's how it is in real life. You're not a kid forever. You're not it's not summer forever.
And it also picks up right where season 4 left off with Eddy being afraid to grow up and stuff. Like, you have no choice now, Eddy.
And not only that, but also when you're a kid and it's summer break, well, I don't know if everybody's going to be able to relate to that now, because there are a lot of places where there isn't summer break anymore. But back in my day, when summer break was the end of summer break was closing in, you would just want to cling to it, you know. That episode, it's strange to say this, but that episode was very real to me. You know, I'm like, man, I know that feeling. I know what it's like to be 20 years ago.
I always love what Rolf says to the Eds when they get to the school. I think it's, half-naked Ed boys, it is here that we will be mercilessly judged.
Yeah, there's something to that effect that he says, and it's really funny.
He's so solemn about it. But I think that's it.
Yep, covered about everything.
Thank you, Kevin. You were a fantastic guest.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yep. It was fun having you.
Feel free to come back anytime.
Okay, I'll be right over.
Well, let me just open the door on for you.